The night was quiet over eastern Ukraine, but the silence was deceptive and an easy calm that soldiers on both sides had learned to mistrust. The black skies above were heavy with storm clouds, and the earth below was trembling not from weather, but from war. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a convoy of Ukrainian howitzers rumbled forward, their engines growling like restless beasts in the dark. These weren't just ordinary trucks or tanks. This was a heavily armed column of Ukraine's precious artillery, the backbone of their resistance. Each howitzer carried the power to rip open Russian fortifications, to shatter armored columns, to hold back an army. The convoy moved cautiously, headlights dimmed, guided by spotters who whispered over radios. The mission was urgent. Redeploy these guns closer to the front line, where Russian troops had been pressing harder by the hour. But unseen eyes were already watching. High above, orbiting silently, was a Russian reconnaissance drone, an electronic predator scanning the terrain with cold precision. From the shadows of the clouds, it captured everything: the formation of vehicles, the dirt tracks carved into the wet soil, even the faint glint of metal under the moonlight. It relayed coordinates back to a Russian command post dozens of kilometers away. Inside that command center, officers leaned over glowing maps. One of them, his voice calm yet sharp, gave the order: target confirmed. Prepare the FAB-3000. The FAB-3000, the name alone carried weight. It was one of Russia's heaviest unguided bombs, a monstrous 3,000-kilogram steel leviathan designed to obliterate hardened positions, bunkers, and entire convoys in one devastating strike. And like smaller munitions, this was not precision, it was destruction incarnate. The order traveled fast. Somewhere on an airfield, a Su-34 fighter bomber roared to life, its twin engines splitting the night with a thunderous growl. Mechanics and ground crew rushed around it, loading the colossal bomb beneath its belly. The sheer size of the FAB-3000 warped the men working around it, like a titan compared to mortals. With final checks complete, the aircraft taxied to the runway and surged upward into the black sky. Meanwhile, on the ground, the Ukrainian convoy pressed forward. Soldiers sat inside armored cabs, weary from days of fighting. Some whispered about home, others smoked nervously, their eyes scanning the horizon. They had no idea what was coming. Above them, the Russian jet closed in, guided by the drone's coordinates. It climbed higher into the night before releasing its deadly payload. The FAB-3000 detached, beginning its descent like a falling star, silent at first, then screaming through the air. What happened next was beyond comprehension.
The bomb struck with the force of an earthquake. A single detonation tore through the ground, hurling steel, dirt, and fire in all directions. The convoy was caught in the open. Howitzers were lifted into the air like toys, their metal frames twisting and snapping as flames engulfed them. Trucks were thrown sideways, soldiers thrown to the ground, ears ringing from the shockwave. The very earth seemed to rise and collapse under the monstrous impact. For kilometers around, windows shattered, trees splintered, and animals fled in terror. The fireball lit up the night sky so brightly that villages miles away saw it as though dawn had come in an instant. For the survivors, reality was drowned in chaos, smoke, flames, and the smell of burning fuel and scorched soil. Russian monitors at the command center watched the impact footage in silence. Then, slowly, a voice reported, "Target destroyed. Convoy neutralized." But the story did not end with the explosion. In Ukraine, word of the strike spread like wildfire. The loss of an entire howitzer convoy was devastating. These guns had been meant to support a major counteroffensive in the east. Soldiers on the front line, waiting for reinforcements, now realized help would not be coming. Commanders scrambled to reroute other artillery, but the gap left by the destroyed convoy could not easily be filled. And yet, there was something deeper than just strategy at play. The attack with the FAB-3000 was more than a battlefield decision, it was psychological warfare. Russia wanted Ukraine to feel the weight of that bomb, to hear its name whispered in fear. They wanted the world to see what they could unleash. Still, even in devastation, Ukraine refused to break. Amid the wreckage, survivors crawled from burning vehicles, coughing and bloodied but alive. Some pulled their comrades from flames, others raised shaky radios to call for medics. What they saw was hell, but they also saw each other, and in that, they found strength. As dawn broke, smoke still hung over the fields like a shroud. Burned-out howitzers stood as blackened skeletons against the pale light. Yet among the ashes, Ukrainian soldiers lifted their weapons again. The war was not over, it had only entered another chapter. The dust had not even settled when the reality of the FAB-3000 strike began to sink in. What had once been a powerful Ukrainian howitzer convoy, tasked with shifting the momentum of the front, was now little more than shattered steel, scattered debris, and plumes of black smoke rising into the cloudy sky. The battlefield was transformed into a graveyard of machines, each ruined vehicle a testament to the brutal power of modern Russian aerial munitions. But the story did not end with destruction. For both sides, this strike became a turning point. Ukrainian commanders, who had pinned their hopes on this howitzer battery to support advancing units, were forced into a sudden and painful reevaluation. Without the cover of those heavy guns, exposed infantry units had to fall back, leaving behind ground they had fought for days to gain. The retreat was chaotic, vehicles colliding, soldiers scrambling to find cover, radio operators screaming over the static for backup that would not arrive. Russian field commanders, meanwhile, seized the moment. "Advance, push through their weakness now," barked Colonel Kravchenko, his voice sharp over the command net. He understood the psychological weight of what had just occurred. It wasn't just about the destroyed hardware, it was about crushing morale. And with the enemy reeling, the Russians saw their chance. Armored columns began to roll forward, supported by infantry fighting vehicles and drones scouting the skies ahead. Each movement was calculated, pressing the Ukrainian forces harder, preventing them from regrouping. Yet even in chaos, Ukraine refused to collapse. Small squads held key defensive positions, ambushing Russian vehicles from hidden trenches and forest lines. What they lacked in heavy artillery, they made up for in grit, resilience, and sheer determination not to let their homeland be overrun. Far to the rear, Ukrainian commanders convened in a makeshift command center. The strike had shocked them, but it also provided clarity. One officer slammed his fist on the table. "We underestimated the threat of FAB-class bombs. These are not ordinary strikes, they are tactical earthquakes. We need to adapt, or we risk losing everything." Plans were drafted within hours. Better air defenses to counter bombers, dispersal tactics to avoid convoy annihilation, and deeper reliance on NATO-supplied long-range weapons. Internationally, news of the FAB-3000 strike spread like wildfire. Media outlets broadcast dramatic satellite images of the cratered battlefield, comparing it to apocalyptic wastelands. Military analysts debated whether this signaled a new phase in the conflict, one where Russia leaned harder on massive, precision-guided bombs to crush Ukrainian strongpoints before they could even enter the fight. Western officials voiced concern, warning that continued use of such devastating weapons could escalate the war further. In Moscow, Kremlin loyalists celebrated the success. Propaganda channels hailed it as proof of Russian superiority, declaring that NATO technology was no match for the might of Russian industry. The FAB-3000 was painted as a war-winning weapon, a symbol of dominance. Yet behind the triumphalism, Russian strategists also knew the truth. Each of these bombs was limited in supply, costly, and required significant planning to deploy effectively. This was not a tool that could be used endlessly without consequence.